Good afternoon, Colorado Springs, and welcome to this micro edition of TBD, the real estate podcast. I'm Rob Thompson, associate broker with the agency here in Colorado Springs, and I have an honored guest this afternoon, here in the form of Rick Ward. Rick, who are you? Who do you work for? What do you do?
Thanks, Rob. So, Rick Ward, I am a highly motivated, highly dedicated mortgage loan officer on the Rick Ward lending team, powered by NorthPointe Bank here in Colorado Springs. So,
right on. I can personally vouch for Rick as an excellent lender. He's hardworking. He's an Air Force vet as well. Army. I'm sorry. Oh, my bad. Army vet. Yeah, I'll still vouch for your work ethic. Well, here in the room, which you can't see in the background, we have a couple Marines as well. So we're just need a Navy person, and we're well represented in the room.
That's right.
But Rick and I are here. We're here just to talk about the real estate market, and it'll be a couple-minute conversation where we're just going to talk. Let's jump right into it. The state of the market. We're in 2018. We're a couple of days into 2018 now. What do you think? What's happening, Rick? How's business for you?
Yeah, so business is booming, honestly. I think what we're seeing is volume is double January this year over January last year, and it was a great year for us last year.
Really, volume is doubled. Anecdotally, we are experiencing an influx of people wanting to buy as well. Double. Okay, so business is booming.
Yeah, it is. I think the impending kind of rumors, and we're starting to see the interest rates kind of creep up a little bit. I think that might be getting people off the fence a little bit too, or maybe just jumping in the market a little more seriously than they were this time last year. So. And
what Rick is referencing is the Fed has indicated it's going to raise rates at least 2 or 3 times. I think they said 3. I heard some chatter yesterday. It might be 2, but I think the official statement was, don't quote me on this, but 3. So I agree. That's my anecdotal experience too, is that people sense that that's happening. Interest rates rising. I will say, as an agent, I do think that will slow our market down a little bit. We're already seeing days on market increase here in Colorado Springs by a function of 2 per month for the last couple of months. Prices slowly were decreasing. Then we actually saw a spike. In December, there's a $6,000 spike in the average sale price of houses, kind of corroborating what you're indicating. Okay. I will say, let me ask you a question. So what I've been telling people is this: if you're looking to buy a home in this market, you should call Rick Ward. but also, no problem. You should ask yourself the following question, in my humble opinion: if I want to buy a house, is it reasonable for me to expect the 7 to 10% appreciation that I need to bring to sell? Let me restart. Is it reasonable for me to expect the 7 to 10% appreciation that I need in the time I intend to hold the home to sell the home? And what I mean by that is, when you're looking at home prices, say that you want to buy a home that's $200,000, you need to plan that's going to cost you 7 to 10% to sell to break even, where break even is defined as not bringing money to the table. For example, you buy a $200,000 home with no money down, you need to sell that home for at least $214,000 to $220,000. To break even, because you don't have to. You could go FSBO, but if you use an agent, there's agent fees, there's closing costs associated with this, and a good ballpark figure is 7 to 10%. So, is it reasonable to expect that 7 to 10% appreciation in the time you intend to hold the home, or are you prepared to be a landlord? If you're prepared to be a landlord, does the home cash flow, or is it maybe it's your long-term home, and you're coming back to it, and you can. Maybe cash flow isn't an issue for you. I had somebody recently who needed, they were at an income level where they actually needed the loss on a home, to write off the loss as a rental property. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So is that a reasonable question to ask from a lender's perspective?
Yeah, I think so. And ultimately, I think the key question you had there, Robert, a point that I want to kind of reemphasize is, how long do you plan on keeping the home? Yeah. That's the key. The shorter period of time you're going to keep the home, that may work against that number you're talking about, versus if you're keeping a home for a little more, you plan on keeping a home 3, 5, 7 years, then that number comes into play much in a different way.
Right. So. Well, then with the historical appreciation of housing being approximately 3%, there's so many variables. It's impossible to predict, of course. Sure. But my operating line, if you will, is that I am making the best decisions I can rationally and logically using the macro historical data. So if I'm going to buy a house, I historically know that I need 3 years of historical appreciation to get that 9%, at that
That's
point.
Right.
somebody called me a couple weekends ago, and they mentioned that they were only going to be on station, a military couple, for 2 more years, or just under 2 years. And they unequivocally stated that they did not want to be landlords. And I asked them, essentially, is that a hard and fast line, or are you willing to maybe entertain it if it comes to that? And they said, no, we're not going to be landlords. I said, well, don't buy a house, because I can't reasonably tell you. And so they appreciate that advice.
Yep.
But,
Rob's one of the good guys out there to actually give people the tough facts sometimes and the real answer, instead of just he's not out chasing a commission. So.
No, it's I don't want to put people in a bad position. I want them to make sound, strategic, and I know you're the same way. So I'm kind of like rhetorical here, but
Sure.
sound, strategic decisions. I believe real estate is an excellent way to build long-term. In fact, it's probably the only way, the only safe way to build long-term wealth. And so you got to approach it from the perspective that we're talking about here, and harping on this a little bit because I know Rick is of the same mindset.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so it's reasonable to expect, or it's not, but they're willing to be landlords. What's the first step in buying a home?
Yeah, so it's not like when you buy a car, right? You go on the car lot and you start looking at cars, right? It's totally different. You really should talk to your lender,
okay,
so you can get a target that makes sense and learn what kind of programs are available for you that's going to fit your long-term and your short-term financial goals. So I'd always recommend you talk to the lender first. Of course, that doesn't always happen, but that's why we partner with great realtors that think like us too. So.
Right on. So you talk to a lender. What's that mean? Did I just give you a ring? I say, Rick, I'm going to buy a house. What's the process I need to go through there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always recommend you have a conversation with me first.
Okay.
So I would give me a call.
Do a loan application through you?
And do a loan application. That's exactly right. Because then we're going to get the cold, hard numbers that we need to do the analysis and to see what kind of programs they're going to fit for you. So, and it's an easy, simple process. You can either do it yourself online, or you could do it over the phone. Call us and we'll fill it out for you.
Okay. So how long does that process, would you say, takes?
Literally 15 minutes
15
max.
minutes, okay.
Yeah, it's basic information that we're going to collect.
Okay. Such as income levels, maybe some basic obligations, make that analysis. So say it comes back and sure, hey Rob, you can buy a house, your price point is $240 max, so that's a pre-qualification, right?
That's right.
And then I'll tell you on the agent side, it isn't like that we don't want to show you homes. To use your car salesman example, I will, and so will car salesmen, not to make the parallel there necessarily, but we will talk about homes and cars all day long, right? But to open those doors, we do need that pre-qualification. It protects you, the buyer, protects the agent's time, it protects the seller's house. So we do need you to be pre-qualified. So let's talk about pre-qualified versus pre-approval. What's the difference?
Yeah. So when we do a pre-qualification, literally it's only as good as the data we're given and that we put into the system and then into your application. We'll run something called AUS, which is an automated underwriting approval system, just to get a general idea if that it's an approvable loan. Once we do that, then to move you to a pre-approved status, and in this market we highly recommend, we collect all your financial documentation that supports the data that you put in the application, review that, and then we move you to a pre-approved status, because that's as close as you're going to get to a cash offer when you make an offer on a house without having a cash offer.
Okay, so pre-qualification, pre-approval. So what I tell my clients is pre-qualification is I talked to the lender. You gave them the data that said, and they issued a pre-qualification based on effectively your verbal, and maybe some surface level validation and documentation, right? Yes. Pre-approval is you validated that data. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You hit the nail on the head there. It's a validation of the data we already have. Absolutely.
And then the difference between that. So say you're looking to buy a house and you enter into a multiple offer situation. List price is $240,000. You get 2 offers, or you're competing against an offer. You're pre-qualified. They're pre-approved. I, as the list agent in that scenario, would actually recommend to my seller, all other things remaining equal, that they go with the pre-approval, because, as you said, it's validated, or as we talked about, it's validated data. So, long story short, spend the 15 or 20 minutes talking to Rick to get pre-qualified before you go home shopping, and most agents will actually require that before they open doors. You can take it a step further by getting pre-approved by giving Rick all the data he needs to validate that, and that makes your offer, as you said, effectively a cash offer. Now that said, if you go up against a cash offer, all things remaining equal, the price is the same. We probably will lose because there's a mantra that says cash is king. that doesn't actually statistically bear out in our market, interestingly enough. But it does close quicker. There's no appraisal. So I'm totally rambling. But get pre-qualified, get pre-approved through Rick. How do they contact you, Rick?
Yeah, so the easiest way to reach me is just call my cell phone, 24/7, 719-229-0375.
24/7. That's dedication, man.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you get pre-qualified, you get pre-approved, you go find a home with an agent, preferably Rob Thompson at 719-440-6626. Find a home, go under contract. I heard about this thing called earnest money. Who is earnest, Rick?
Earnest is Malcolm's word. No, but earnest money really is it's real money that you're going to have in your hand, literally in your account.
Okay, not cash.
Not cash, okay. But in your account, okay. As a good faith deposit when you go under contract, and so that money usually is not borrowed. Right, so just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean that you can't get a gift on certain loan programs, but the ultimate thing you need to remember about earnest money is it's not mattress money in a safe, or cash sitting around. It's got to be money that's sourced and we can track.
And I believe the sourcing is 60 days, right?
Correct.
So maybe I'm a guy, maybe I like cash. Maybe I have $1,000 in cash that I intend to use for my earnest money. You need to put that in the bank 60 days before you tender the earnest money, right, effectively? Or is it 60 days before closing?
60 days before. We need two basically clean bank statements. So that's why they usually have that 60-day number to make sure that you're showing that you didn't make a large deposit, that we can't source where it came from.
Gotcha. So government regulations, you got to source the money. It's anti-money laundering, things like that. Yes. So just know that cash doesn't work. Also, you can't, as Rick said, don't borrow the money. Don't swipe your credit card for a cash advance on the money, because they have to source this money. And now it can sometimes be a gift. A relative could gift you the money. They need to be willing to sign a statement, if I'm not mistaken, that says this is a gift and there's no expectation of repayment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. It's and we provide those forms, and we'll walk you through that and hold your hand when you get to that point. So,
bottom line on that one, any question at all, ask your lender first about money. Your agent can answer some of these questions too, but we'll generally tell you practically this is what we think, but we'll always end the sentence with comma. Talk to the lender.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so earnest money, we get pre-qualified, we get pre-approved, we find a house. Within 3 to 4 days of contract is the norm in our market. You have to tender this money called earnest money. That money is heavily protected in this state, by the way, but I won't go down that lane yet. Tender the earnest money, then you have an inspection. You walk through the inspection process, and then you have this thing called an appraisal. And what I tell my folks is the inspector looks at a house from a micro lens. They're looking to find problems. The appraiser is effectively, for the most part, does it have 4 walls? Does it have a furnace, a water heater? Is it structurally sound? If it's a VA or FHA loan, they also look for chipped or peeling paint, those things. What I'm asking for, though, is I want to ask about the cost of an appraisal. Let's just use a VA appraisal. Costs $750, right?
That's correct, in Colorado.
Yeah, in Colorado, right. Okay. Do you charge for that appraisal up front?
We do not.
Okay.
We factor it in as part of your closing costs to be expected to be paid at closing.
Okay, and so that differentiates Rick from some lenders in town, and there's a reason for it. With the volume of activity we do, some lenders have had to charge up front for appraisal, because what happens is maybe the deal has to terminate after the appraisal has been out there. Well, then somebody's on the hook for that $750, and a lot of lenders can't eat that cost. But you mentioned before, while we were talking about this podcast, Rick, that if a buyer must terminate after that inspection, as long as they stick with you as a lender, that you don't double tap on the appraisal fees.
That's correct, and that's a good point, because many times many lenders will. That's what they do, because what you said, they can't afford to eat that cost. So
it's a lot of cost, especially volume.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
Now I will suggest to you too, on the agent side, that one thing I do as an agent is I make sure that we have a good inspection before we greenlight the appraisal, and then so my timelines for my contracts are built so that we have the time. And what I want my clients to do is walk out of the inspection and ask themselves if the seller says no to everything on this list, do I still want to buy the house? If the answer to that is yes, order the appraisal. But we don't tell the seller that, of course. But my bottom line advice is wait till after you have a good inspection to order the appraisal, so there's no risk of paying for an appraisal that you're going to terminate on. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, that's the process. So closing cost, or did we talk about, I don't think we talked, okay, let's talk about closing costs real quick.
Okay.
In our market, closing costs this last year were really tough to win on. But what are closing costs, Rick?
I mean, they're just fees that are associated with getting the loan done, essentially. And they do vary from lender to lender what they charge for what typical parts of the service. But I think that what's important to note is that closing costs, it not necessarily has to come out of your pocket necessarily, depending on the type of loan. You know, the interest rates move in ranges, and we can adjust rates and the pricing of those rates and the fees on every individual's own financial scenario of how they want to approach it and how they want to close on this home. So we can custom tailor it so that it makes sense for you and in your family situation, so that you can get into the home.
Gotcha. Okay. So costs associated with the loan, closing costs. That doesn't necessarily mean that money out of your pocket. To stop what Rick said, you can buy some costs inside your range. I would suggest that 250 or below in our market, it's really hard to win on closing costs. So you need to be prepared that you may have to bring some money to the table, or you may have to adjust your interest rate. But when we talk about closing costs, those aren't necessarily costs out of your pocket, but it's a question to ask. I like to use the actual terminology, seller's concessions towards a buyer's closing costs. It's a little bit more of a mouthful, but it's an important distinction.
Sure.
Well, I think that really covers it up. Rick, covers it all, Rick. We talked about state of the market. We talked about interest rates. Fed has already indicated that they're going to raise. They do that, I think, back me up here or not. They do that to soften the market ahead of those raises.
That's exactly right.
Okay. We talked about should you buy. We touched briefly on should you buy a home in this market. I think personally that days on market are, empirically I know days on market are increasing. I think that the question you should ask yourself is, do I have the timeline to buy this house? Am I prepared for plan B, which is, am I ready to be a landlord? We talked about pre-qualification and pre-approval and distinction there. We talked about appraisals, earnest money, Ernest and his money. And then we talked briefly about closing costs. You have anything you'd like to add, man?
No, I really appreciate you taking a little time to ask me a few questions here, Rob. And as always, it's awesome to work with you. So anybody out there looking for a house, you really should call Rob Thompson.
And if you're looking for a loan, you should call Rick. How do they get a hold of you, Rick?
719-229-0375.
That's Rick's cell phone number. Mine is 719-440-6626. You can also hit me up on Facebook at facebook.com/Rob Thompson Realtor. That's my broker page. I know it. If you have any questions about housing whatsoever, this is the guy to talk to.
Thanks,
Rick.
Rob.
No problem.